Good afternoon. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like to say a few words to John Vickers, his staff, Matthew and Manny, and the volunteers who've contributed to making IU Cinema an extraordinary venue for film. In large measure, because of IU Cinema, film has become, in my view, no less important to the intellectual and cultural life of the campus than music, dance, or drama. And to say the achievements of IU Cinema have been less than laudable would be to ignore the enviable record of its many accomplishments. So thank you, John, and your crew for making IU Cinema a world-class site on campus and the jewel in the crown for the exhibition and study of film at Indiana University. We have the good fortune this afternoon to engage with one of the most discerning cinematic voices in the United States. Director, producer, cinematographer, and writer, Charles Burnett, whom I was privileged to converse with nearly 3 years ago during a film festival in New Orleans, where he commanded, as he usually does, center stage. There, before an audience of film enthusiasts, cultural and community workers, the public, in a place not as impressive as IU Cinema, Mr. Burnett calmly and with sincere modesty discussed his life and practice as an independent filmmaker. Much of that interview was later published in the journal Black Camera. Before he joins us on stage, I want to briefly chronicle what surely is an extraordinary career marked by irony, determination, and invention. Here's the irony and paradox part of it. While a major voice, Burnett is generally unknown to American audiences. In fact, the New York Times has named him the nation's, and I'm quoting here, the nation's least known great filmmaker and most gifted black director. Kim Nelson, in the film journal Senses of Cinema, described Burnett as the epitome of a cult hero, almost famous for not being famous. How can this be? A transplant from Vicksburg, Mississippi, Burnett grew up in the Watts area of Los Angeles, where his family had migrated to in the hope of negotiating a better life. Consider that historically, LA was one of several destinations, and not uncommon for African Americans from the Deep South. After high school, Burnett trained to become an electrician. Sensible thing to do, but his interest in photography led him to UCLA's film school. There, and this is key, Burnett, among other film students of color, formed what would later be called the LA School. Clyde Taylor, the film scholar and cultural critic, coined the group the LA Rebellion. Even more provocative than Taylor's characterization, Tony K. Bambara referred to them as, I quote, the black insurgents, evoking the notion of self-determination, which resonated, especially among black nationalists at the time, who identified with decolonization struggles occurring throughout the Third World. I'm not sure Mr. Burnett agrees with either branding, so I will be sure to ask him during our conversation shortly. Whatever trademark is privileged, the point is that the UCLA experience was a defining moment in the group's and Mr. Burnett's political and cinematographic formation that coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, paralleled a similar development on the East Coast. Traces of this resurgence in the black independent film movement are also to be found in Chicago, among artists and intellectuals in the black arts movement of that period. However distinctive and diverse their artistic styles, sensibilities, and thematic concerns, Burnett and his companions, whether in the first or second cohort or wave, fervently and critically rejected the storytelling conventions of Hollywood, and more importantly, Hollywood's complicity in American racism. In 1980, Burnett received the much-coveted Guggenheim Fellowship, followed in '88 by a MacArthur, otherwise known as Genius Award, which enabled him to begin work on To Sleep with Anger. The 1990s, as John stated earlier, Burnett migrated to television, directing projects for the Disney Channel, Oprah Winfrey, ABC, and other mainstream channels, while continuing work on other stuff and independent productions. During the next several days, you have the unique opportunity to see Mr. Burnett's films, and I urge you to see as many of them as you can, but especially Killer of Sheep, which will be shown here tomorrow night and introduced by film scholar James Narramore. Mr. Burnett, as well, will be present during the screening and take questions afterwards. Named among the 100 essential films by the National Society of Film Critics, Killer of Sheep is exemplary of the new realism in black independent cinema, and stands by all counts as Mr. Burnett's timeless masterpiece. And I should say, for its portrayal of black working class life and family in America. It sets the standard for the theme of this series, Arriving at the Truth. A raconteur of extraordinary vision and sensitivity, let's welcome Mr. Charles Burnett. Mr. Burnett, I thought we would begin this conversation about your formation as a filmmaker, attending UCLA Film School. What lessons, if any, did you learn while attending at UCLA? Lessons about filmmaking, about your craft.
Well, one of the things about UCLA then was that it was sort of, that there was a structure, but it was left up to the students to really sort of take the initiative to sort of learn on their own to some extent. Because after you take, all the preliminary courses like film history and things like that, and some other classes, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but to get into the production department, you had to do project one, and you had to be successful at it. Project one was a class where you made a little film, a silent film, but you add music later or something like that. But it was your first film, and if you did very well, and out of 70 students, it only took 10. And then after that, if it was successful, they gave you a camera, basically, and said, here, go out and make a film, and come back with something we haven't seen before. And so that was a good thing about UCLA. But the important thing was that you counted on your fellow students to sort of get through the day, because you had to sort of, you learn basically by working on other students' films. And so we formed groups and so worked on everyone's film. And so it was learning to work with different, it was a very diverse group at the time, and so I was learning to sort of work with everybody. It was also a thing, because later on, because that's become so important in becoming a filmmaker, is learning how to work with other talented people.
Did you discover in that process, in that experience, things about yourself that inform your work?
I think because of the political times, it was during the civil rights movement and things like that, you became political. And I think that's what happened to me when I went to UCLA, or when I was going to college at that time, because it was, you're either part of the problem or a part of the solution, as the phrase went, And so you were sort of put in a corner, so to speak, It's something that we chose, in a sense, because we thought we were doing something, part of the movement. But in terms of learning, I don't know. I mean, I was aware of the kind of films I wanted to make, because it was a constant debate, a discussion about, you know, what is a black film, and what you should be doing as a filmmaker, and what is your responsibility. And in that sense, I was sort of forming what I wanted to be, in that sense.